Welcome to the first episode of the Web3 Vision, brought to you by ENS Vision. At ENS Vision, we are the leading marketplace for ENS domains in Web3. However, with this podcast, we want to get out of our ENS echo chamber and look at Web3 as a whole. That said, if you are going to talk about Web3, you cannot not talk about ENS domains, which are one of the fundamental ingredients of the Web3 infrastructure. So for our first episode, we wanted to discuss it. And who better for this ENS-centric episode than the creator of ENS itself, Nick Johnson, also known as Nick.eth. ENS has been under some controversy lately because despite the huge success of the ENS token airdrop of 2021 and the ENS summer of 2022, despite being better funded than ever thanks to millions of dollars from registration fees, it is as if the organization had lost some of its momentum ever since the force of nature that Brantly was dismissed from ENS. But what is sure is that even if the ENS project could do with a little more leadership and a stronger sense of direction and vision, it still has one of the best developers in Web3 guiding the code boat. In a recent podcast interview, Brantly, the man who was dismissed from ENS precisely by Nick, had this to say about Nick, and I quote word for word. Nick is an extremely good developer, like spectacular, top-notch, like 100x developer, a rare talent, frankly, literally just Nick. There are other good developers on the team, but Nick is very, very good. He can look at a problem and come up with this extremely simple, elegant solution that 100 other developers never would have come up with. And that is actually one of the superpowers that ENS has. So when somebody has nothing to gain with it and actually was fired precisely by that same person, has something so good to say about that person, I listen. So now let's meet the man behind the ENS magic, the man behind the code. Hello, Nick. Thank you for coming on the show. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, and it's my pleasure.
Excellent. This show is called the Web3 Vision, and we like to start by asking people what they think about Web3, about the term Web3, because it's a very multi-meaning kind of term. And what does Web3 mean for you?
I think it's an effort to take back control of users' data and to build applications where the user isn't the product, and where people have control over how they interact with their apps, what data they share, and using platforms that don't have the ability to just unilaterally remove them for sort of computer says no reasons.
Okay, so more than a synonym for the cryptosphere, right?
I think crypto is a core component of realizing Web3, but one of the things I like about the term is that it doesn't exclusively focus on cryptocurrency and blockchain.
Yes, definitely. And we are seeing that more and more as time goes by, like cryptocurrencies were like a little bit like the gateway drag into decentralization. So let's start from the beginning, your origin story. Tell us a little bit about where you are from, if that is doxed, or where did you study, what did you do before crypto?
So sure, yeah, I was working as a software engineer at Google back in 2016 when I was contacted by a recruiter for a large financial services firm who asked me, would I like to come work for them on Ethereum? And I'm like, no, not really, but this Ethereum thing sounds interesting. And I started looking into it and exploring it and immediately got very engaged with it. I thought it was fascinating, and it was, it did a bunch of things.
That's how you got into crypto. Do you have something to share about before you got into crypto, just to know your background a bit better?
Sure. Yeah, well, I've been a software engineer since when I turned about 18 and started working part-time in software at the same time as pursuing a degree. I ended up doing more and more software and less degree until I dropped out. And I've been, building computer systems ever since, at a variety of places in a variety of countries. I've worked and lived in New Zealand, where I'm from, in Ireland, in Australia, and the UK. And I recently moved back to the UK from New Zealand again. I guess, information technology, particularly anything with computer science, like intersection, really fascinates me. Which is, what attracted me to things like Ethereum as well.
And can you tell us a little bit, because Google is like in everybody's imagination, right? It's like very legendary. Did you work for Google in Europe? I understand, more than in America.
Yes, so I got hired by Google when living in New Zealand, and joined them in the Dublin office. So I moved to Ireland for that. Worked in Dublin for about 4.5 years before moving to Australia for another couple of years. Left Google, moved to the UK, rejoined Google, and that was where I was working when I first got involved in Ethereum.
Okay, and how come you left and rejoined Google? What happened there in the middle?
A bit of burnout, really. I decided I wanted to go try working at some startups, and I had some fun times there, but ultimately I missed a lot of the stuff I had at Google, in terms of like a large peer network and interesting things outside core work, and just a really good working environment where it felt like I was having an impact. And then I left again, mostly because I discovered Ethereum and it was too fascinating not to work on, but partly because I didn't feel like I had that impact anymore. And it did feel like the organization was changing and becoming less accountable to the people who worked for it.
Definitely. Yes, I think you lived like a big chunk of the heyday of Google. I see it was from 2007 to 2016. So it's where Google was like everything, and we were all the time like surprised about how a company could deliver so much, and still they were still associated with that don't be evil kind of ethos, and they really seem to be living up to that standard for a long while. So really you were in a moment there that I can understand that you felt that you were in a very relevant place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And definitely it's not the same, especially right now. It's like as organizations get big, they start to struggle. And as you say, that started already when you were at the end of your time there. But now even more, I know that you also are watching artificial intelligence with a lot of interest. I'm very surprised how slow they are reacting to the Microsoft OpenAI integration. Everybody's saying that Bard, their ChatGPT rival Bard, is terrible. And I have to admit, I've tried Bard and it is terrible. So it's like, at some point it looks like organizations get just too big and they just, they are not creative or...
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Microsoft, because they've gone through the same thing that Google seems to be going through now, and they've reinvented themselves a couple of times, fairly successfully.
Yes.
But it does seem to be a sort of cycle of decay and regrowth, doesn't it?
Definitely. Now Google is like Microsoft at the beginning of the internet era, right? When everybody was saying they are too big, they are not able to adapt to the internet. And now the king of the internet, Google, is failing, and the old dinosaur is becoming the new shiny new thing. So yeah, it's very ironic.
It is, yeah.
Then crypto arrived, and you were telling me before what happened, right? How did it start? What was your first contact with crypto?
So I learned about Bitcoin, I don't know, probably 2013 or something around there. Bitcoin was about £100 each at the time. I'm probably getting the date wrong. I thought it looked kind of interesting, read the white paper, was a bit disappointed that it was just focused on transferring money, that it seemed like here is an opportunity for a platform that has immense capacity in terms of it's basically a distributed ledger and a shared consensus with a trustless mechanism, and they're just using it for money. And I was a bit disappointed, to be honest. So I looked at it a little bit. I bought a few Bitcoin. They sat around doing nothing. The price stayed about the same. I sold most of them. I at a slight loss. I kept one on my phone that I then replaced and reformatted and only realized afterwards. I spent one on a deluxe version of a board game, and the rest I sold back. And then I kind of ignored crypto for a while until 2016. I got contacted by a large financial services company. Would I like to come work with them on Ethereum? And I said, well, not really. It's not really the sort of place I want to work, but started looking at Ethereum and realized this was exactly what I had been thinking like Bitcoin lacked. This was the potential of distributed computation that I thought was really exciting. And I started building stuff on top of it, starting with Solidity libraries. And after not very long at all, got a call from the Ethereum Foundation about whether I'd like to come work for them. And took the plunge, 50% pay cut and contractor instead of employee and no benefits. But I was so engaged and interested in what was happening that I couldn't help myself.
So you first started doing some things on your own, and they kind of discovered you via those things you were doing.
Yes,
interesting.
Exactly.
And when you joined the Ethereum Foundation, it had already been going for kind of 2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
but it was still small.
It was about 9 months post-launch of the mainnet. So I think they'd probably been going at least 3 years, I think. And it was relatively small, certainly a lot smaller than it is now. I don't know exactly how many people, though.
It was fully remote also, or not yet?
Yes. Yeah, they had briefly had a London office before I joined, but that was already discontinued when I joined.
And did you have an opportunity at the time to work with Vitalik? Did you work side by side with him?
So I was initially working on the Swarm team and then very quickly pivoted to the Go Ethereum team. And I certainly interacted with Vitalik, especially when, I was doing stuff mainly outside my day-to-day in terms of, EIPs and so forth. But I wouldn't say, side by side on a day-to-day basis. It was more that he poked his head in when we were doing anything interesting.
Okay. And you very soon started with the Ethereum name service project, or you were doing other things before?
Yeah, I started with that as a side project almost as soon as I joined, because it was already something I had interest in, and it already seemed like a really obvious sort of glaring UX omission from Ethereum and crypto in general. So I started building that at my time, like when I first joined the Swarm team, because they needed a naming service as well.
After that, the Ethereum name service spun off from the Ethereum Foundation, as many people know, and now it's an independent organization, but is completely supported by Ethereum and Vitalik, as everybody also know, because they are very clear about that. But how is the contact on a day-to-day basis? Do you have access to them? Do you have an easy way of communication, not just with Vitalik, that I suppose he's super busy? I don't know if you can send him an email and he will reply, or he doesn't have time for anybody anymore, the poor thing.
It all comes down to how interesting the email is, I think, as much as anything else. Yeah, but back in the day when we were spun out, it was because we'd reached a point where it had grown beyond what I could do on my own, even as a full-time job. Needed to start building a team. And the EF was experimenting with spinning out teams into separate orgs, and wanted us to be the guinea pig, basically. And so what they offered was, put together a proposal, tell us how much you need to be your own organization and hire people and build this on your own, and we'll give you a grant to get you started. And I did the math and came back with that I thought we could support ourselves for 18 months with the headcount I wanted for about 500K. and they sent that to Vitalik, and he came back and said, no, that's totally inappropriate, you need $1 million, and gave us a grant of $1 million. And that got us well and truly started for a good while. After a while, ENS itself wasn't bringing in a lot of revenue yet, because that wasn't our main focus. And we went back to the EF for a top-up grant, which they very generously helped with. And then post that, ENS really took off. We had the short name options, and then the current registrar, which charges a registration fee. And the result of all that was a sustainable income for ENS, and we've been self-sustaining and then some ever since.
Yes, definitely. That has changed a lot, and now it is a very good thing that ENS is safe and well-funded, and that's really very good for Web3. So let's now move on to the tech block of the interview. And one of the things, well, the Harberger Tax is more regulatory than tech. But regarding the Harberger Tax, many people think, I also want to ask you about this, because many people in the community think that you were the proponent of the Harberger Tax, and it's actually the opposite. You had a conversation online with Vitalik on Twitter, and then you wrote a whole article explaining why you thought that the Harberger Tax is not a good idea. So can you explain it?
In my mind, one of the most, if not the most crucial attributes of a good naming system is to have assurance and security over the ownership of a name. It should be possible for someone who wants to use a name to register it and own it, and know that they will own it for at least whatever period. And, in my mind, ideally that is as long as you renew it for, 1,000 years if you want. But at an absolute minimum, it needs to be, year by year. And I think it's absolutely crucial that that's the case, because we can't expect people to check back on a regular basis to check if they still own the name, or to notice that, a bid has come in or something like that. And I think if you don't have that property, that name ownership is assured for an extended period, then you don't have a very useful naming system. And more importantly, you don't have a safe naming system. You end up with situations where someone can acquire the name without the current owner's knowledge, and then that owner will mistakenly direct people to send them funds or NFTs or access to things or whatnot, to what turns out to no longer be their name. So the problem with all of the Harberger Tax schemes I've seen is that they don't provide that guarantee. And they, by necessity, they have to have some way to take the name off the person and give it to the person who's willing to pay more. And, Vitalik and I had a really productive back and forward. Vitalik sees things differently in terms of, what the acceptable trade-offs are. We didn't really come to an agreement, but we both see each other's points, and I think we, explain them very well to the world. I'm not opposed to different registration mechanisms and so forth, but I think they need to preserve that absolutely crucial aspect that people can rely that their names are going to continue to be theirs as long as they're willing and interested in maintaining them.
Yes, definitely. As a rule of thumb, I'm a big proponent of, if it's not broken, don't touch it in general. There are many exceptions, right? But when something works, it's so difficult to create ecosystems that work, and that one has to be very careful before experimenting. So if anybody is interested in knowing all the details, I invite them to read your article on why the Harberger Tax is not a good idea, because you really go into detail there, and it's very interesting. So another technical thing that I think it's interesting to our audience is now that the subdomain wrapper is around the corner, on OpenSea and other generalist marketplaces. For example, on ENS Vision, we are building a tailor-made solution that will display subdomains seamlessly, etc. But on non-specific ENS marketplaces like OpenSea, etc., will the new wrapped domains appear in a totally different collection from the old domains?
By default on any marketplaces that haven't upgraded to support this, that would be the case. We're working with OpenSea and with other marketplaces to integrate the new wrapped names as part of the existing collection, so that there's none of that confusion. So right on, day one, OpenSea and others will just show them seamlessly.
That's a great thing. Recently, the Coinbase CEO has been mentioning ENS a lot, and particularly when he was commenting on his creation of Base, his layer 2 blockchain, he even included ENS as one of the reasons for his creating the Base blockchain. So do you have anything to share with us in that regard, or?
Nothing that isn't already public. We have a really productive relationship with Coinbase, and it's been a real pleasure to help them build out their identity layer and build it on top of ENS and do it right. They seem really interested in doing it right, not just quickly, and in building a system that will be truly decentralized. It endears like Coinbase itself to me, and it shows me that they care about building systems that are sort of Web3 native. But everything that's out there is out there, and I can't talk about anything that isn't.
That makes sense. So in regards to layer 2s, something that is a bit confusing for many people who are not who are not active users of layer 2s. Can ENS domains be used currently with layer 2s?
So it depends a little on what you mean by used. The main application we have in mind for layer 2s is making it easier and cheaper to create subdomains, to set records and so forth. And that's our main area of active development. That's what Coinbase is doing with .base.
Yes.
And
sorry, actually, I was gonna ask you about that after, but what I meant here mostly was if you are on a layer 2 network doing transactions, .eth names do already resolve in those networks?
Yes, so ENS support on L2s depends a little on the L2 and the wallet. ENS itself is fully compatible with all the L2s, and in fact with a great variety of chains that aren't even L2s. It supports resolving addresses for all of them. It also supports, in the case of EVM compatible L2s, falling back to your regular Ethereum address if you wish. So you can specify one address for all the L2s, or you can specify separate addresses for optimism and so on and so forth. Wallet support for that is still a little spotty and something we're working on getting rolled out more.
So even wallets that support ENS domains maybe don't support ENS domains on layer 2s, correct?
Not necessarily yet, yeah. But it's a very easy upgrade for them to build. It just requires us to reach out to them, or somebody to reach out to them and encourage them to do that.
Okay, and what about Polygon?
So Polygon, in a technical sense, is a separate chain rather than an L2. We absolutely support resolving Polygon addresses against your ENS name. Again, whether your particular wallet depends on that wallet. Okay.
I was asking because I know that unstoppable domains have become kind of the de facto naming system, or maybe even the official naming system for Polygon. And that's why I was wondering if that means that they are not going to support ENS as much as they would.
So I'm a little skeptical of any system that can have official integrations, because it doesn't spell decentralized to me, but they are still a system anyone can build on, and so ENS will continue to do so.
Great. And another thing that is quite of a technical subject is decentralized websites, because there are many things that need to happen for decentralized websites to really be a thing. And I know that in the past, decentralized websites were quite of a big thing for ENS, a big priority. And I understand that after that, they became like less of a priority, maybe. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. I'd say it's we've deprioritized them. The support we had is fairly mature, and perhaps we haven't focused as much on extending that support in our efforts to work on L2s and other chains. But it is still very much a priority for us that ENS is a naming service for decentralized content, not just for wallet addresses.
Another thing with websites is that many people are starting to say that maybe we are living in Web 2 also the end of the website because of artificial intelligence and because we may be interacting more with the internet via conversations with our agents. So that's also...
I'm fascinated, as you mentioned, by AI and the new developments around it. I do feel like chat interfaces have their place, but they can be quite low bandwidth in some regards. I don't think everything is going to be replaced by chatting with an AI. And I think websites are still going to be very much the dominant way a lot of people consume a lot of information. You know, if you want to read the latest news, an AI might help curate that for you, but something like a website is probably still the best way to view and read the articles rather than having a conversation with it about what just happened, you know.
So in regard to decentralized websites, one of the things that puzzle many people is why, because we have two main ways to access them. Apart from Brave and Opera, we have .eth.limo and eth.link. And people say eth.limo works great, but looks bad. And eth.link looks great, but works bad. What's what's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we got the better name first because we got in first, and the limo folks had to settle for .limo. The integration, you know, we moved a while back from hosting it ourselves to using Cloudflare when they offered to start hosting it. Cloudflare has a reputation for high reliability. Unfortunately, that hasn't always been the case for eth.link. And you know, we've worked with them to improve that, and it should get better now that it's an officially sanctioned, you know, launch quality product rather than an internal beta. But it has been a little disappointing at times to see it, you know, being unreliable. I am a huge fan of the eth.limo folks who are running it all themselves and built their own implementations and so forth. And I think they're doing an outstanding job, and a diversity of implementations really helps us here. I guess it's worth saying too, the reason we moved away from hosting it ourselves is because we felt it was a distraction. We were spending a lot of engineering effort on keeping it up and scaling it and so forth that we couldn't spend on improving ENS in general. And I generally think that an ecosystem where we're not the ones who have to do everything is a healthy ecosystem.
Yes, definitely. And is there any plans to maybe gift or lend eth.link to some organization like Limo so that they can manage it or not?
Not at present, but it would be an interesting thing to explore in the future.
Okay, because I think that many people think, I'm sure you agree, that a good eye-catchy extension or TLD could do a lot for promoting the creation of decentralized websites, because if you have a website, apart from wanting it to resolve that it happens very well with Limo, it's also that you need something that looks professional or generates trust. No, so Link in that sense is a very good candidate. Another one that I think looks maybe even better than Link is .co, .eth.co. If the .eth.co people wanted to allow people to use their domains to resolve websites, it would be a great thing. For example, if you don't have any decentralized websites, it shows your profile as it does now. If you have a decentralized website, you can opt in and tell .eth.co, show my website. So many people would share their decentralized website. And I think it would be also good for .eth.co, because many people would just look up if somebody has something in their domain. They would say, let's see if this person has built something, and if they haven't built anything, at least I see their profile. So it would be a win-win for .eth.co, and I think they have the best one. And there is another one, .eth.net, that would be great. but that one is for sale. I don't know how much the owner wants, but that would be great. .eth.net. Anyway,
It wouldn't be cheap.
it's not gonna be cheap, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Well,
I agree. Finding more good URLs for gateways is going to have an impact on making it more acceptable for people to use these things. And
yes,
as you say, it does have an impact on the image it conveys to someone.
exactly. Okay, so moving to the timeline block of questions. The Namewrapper is here. We can say it's almost here. It doesn't matter if it's a few days or a few weeks, but something that you were just mentioning before, and that it's very interesting. Layer 2s on the ENS app. No, at some point in the workings that people are gonna be able to create their subdomains on layer 2s or their records on layer 2s to save a lot of gas to users. How is that gonna work, and what is the timeline?
So there's several components to it, and some of them are out already. CCIP read is the core of this, and it basically allows you to resolve ENS names using resources that are off the Ethereum chain. And that can be an L2, it can also be some other system entirely. But when it's an L2, it gives you the advantage that it can be entirely trustless. So you don't have to rely on any sort of trusted oracle. You don't have to rely on ENS itself. You don't have to rely on the owner of the name. All of that trust can be removed so that you know it's resolving correctly. That's already in place. Then we need an Optimism or an Arbitrum or any other L2 integration that provides a gateway that does this trustless interface. We have in conjunction with Chainlink, we've built a prototype of the Optimism one, and another team, the DM3 team, has now built a more productionized version of that, which we're going to work with them to develop further. And so what we want to do is have official gateways for each of the L2s that are, well supported, hosted by us or by a party who's, receiving grants from the ENS DAO. In principle, it doesn't matter who hosts it because it's trustless, but it matters that it's available and that it's fast and so forth. And then the final component is the UX integration, where you go to something like the ENS app and it just seamlessly recognizes, oh, your records are hosted on Optimism via this gateway. We'll just show them to you the same as on Ethereum. When you go to submit a transaction, we either tell you, please switch to Optimism, or we just give you a meta transaction. And that's going to be pretty much our next priority now that the Namewrapper and V3 of the app are coming out.
Uh-huh. And before, when I cut you off, you were saying that you were also helping Base to implement some kind of layer 2 support for hosting, or not? Or
So
did I
it's the
hear wrong?
same. It's the same basic deal with Base, in that they need a gateway. It operates the same way as the Optimism gateway. They presumably will host it themselves, but then it allows people to trustlessly resolve that data. Coinbase is going a step further and making their names tokens on Base, meaning they can be traded. At the moment, that still requires some degree of trust because Coinbase is based on cb.id. That's a DNS name. They could point it somewhere else anytime they wanted. So you do still have to trust that Coinbase isn't going to rug your Coinbase subdomains.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, you'll be able to trade ENS subdomains on their network, and they'll work the way you'd expect them to.
Okay, who knows? Also, many people noticed that they had acquired base.eth. So who knows? Maybe there's something that happens in the future. So Ethiopia. This is something very desired by everybody. Can you tell us, well, in case somebody doesn't know, to be allowed to manage the .eth domain extension or TLD in Web2, there needs to be a negotiation with both ICANN, the organization that manages Web2 domains, and with Ethiopia, the government of Ethiopia. How far are negotiations right now? Is there anything that you can share?
It's been a long and difficult process because you have to find somebody and vet them and actually be fairly sure that they are able to talk for, the country. And often that's not the case. What it is they assure you that they have connections and that if they have the resources, they can talk to the right people and get us meetings, and we can then convince them and so forth. And it can be extremely difficult to know how credible these things are and how far to pursue them to sort of see where they go. It's difficult at the best of times, but none of us are international diplomats. So we're working on it. It also helps to sort of explore the scope of this a bit, which is that there's a couple of ways it could go. One is Ethiopia could write a letter, basically a letter of non-objection, saying, we don't mind if ENS has .eth. And then we could approach ICANN with that and say, we would like .eth, we're going to bid for it in the next, TLD auction. Clearly you should give it to us because we're the only ones who have this letter, and you generally have a policy of not giving it out, out 3-letter ISO country codes. So then we have to convince Ethiopia for the letter, and then we have to convince ICANN to honor the letter to issue the TLD. The other option is that Ethiopia could say, we've decided we're going to manage .eth, and our operator is going to be ENS, and go to the IETF, who in some ways is sort of able to overrule ICANN here with standards, and go, we demand you pass an RFC to get this added to the global route as our name. And in that instance, we would be able to operate .eth directly, which would have some advantages because it would mean where country code top level domains like .uk and so forth aren't subject to ICANN's rules. So you can make your own rules for dispute resolution and for ownership and for registrations and all that sort of stuff, rather than having to adopt ICANN's. And that could lead to a much more crypto compatible TLD than one that was operated via ICANN. But this is also unprecedented. The closest is like .tv, which got sold to an organization to sell as regular domains. But in that case, it was a country code TLD that was already owned by Tuvalu, so they could easily delegate it to someone else. In this case, it would be them basically trying to assert a new property right that heretofore has only been really sort of reserved out of a sense of caution, and then delegate it to someone else. So it's uncertain how that would go. And of course, the X factor in all of this is that a future government of Ethiopia could go, you know what, that was a bad deal. We don't like it anymore. We're taking it back. And then it's a question of, who would listen and whether you then lose .eth. So the whole thing is complicated and fraught. And if we're going to do it, we need to make sure that we're on really solid footing. So kind of impossible to give a timeline or even really much in the way of progress reports until we know where we stand.
Yeah, definitely. Option one sounds safer because you never know how governments can change, especially from one government to the next election, another government, etc.
Even with option one, it seems uncertain to me if Ethiopia suddenly said, no, you know what, we do object now, I can give that back. How ICANN would react.
Okay. I thought that ICANN couldn't change their minds in that case. Okay, so
they
in that
always
case,
change their minds.
They can. Okay, so yes, it's not easy.
Again,
okay.
Totally unprecedented, but this is untrodden turf.
Mm-hmm. And 1 and 2 characters. 1 and 2 characters, character .eth domains. Is there any plans, even if it's not a timeline, do you have already envisioned what would be the best way of releasing them, with a big auction or something like that?
I think so any sort of release of new names has to have something akin to an auction in order to ensure that it doesn't just become a gas auction where the MEVors get all the benefit of the difference in price between the list price and the real price of something. There's nothing even approaching solid plans. There's sort of there's two options here. One is you just release them in the same way that existing names are, with tiered pricing. The other is that you try and do something different and novel. I proposed a little while ago, and it's interesting because we were talking about Harberger taxes earlier, that the DAO could always consider doing something Harberger-esque with 1 and 2 character names. And the way that would work is that they would mostly be intended to be used for subdomains. The names would be set up so that all 1 and 2 character subdomains are wrapped using the Namewrapper automatically with indefinite expiries. And so basically owning a 1 or a 2 character name would give you the right to issue subdomains and charge for that, that right, and charge for renewals. And you would then use a Harberger Tax like scheme to decide who owns each of those. So you could acquire, go.eth or whatever by outbidding the current owner, in which case you would then have the right to issue new go.eth subdomains and to charge for renewals and so forth. But the people who had already registered subdomains would still be safe. You wouldn't be able to disrupt their ownership or reassign it. That's more along the lines of here's an interesting proposal than anything that could be directly implemented. But I think it's worth exploring different options for that because there's just so very few of those names. It would be a shame if they just got scooped up and sat on and not used for interesting things.
Yes, it needs to be well done because it's very iconic, emblematic, important, and yes.
Mm-hmm.
So moving to a slightly more controversial block, I don't know if you watched it, but recently Brantly gave a very heartfelt interview saying goodbye to ENS. It was kind of a goodbye, and it was quite sad to watch how he feels that a project he gave everything to maybe remove him in a very drastic manner. So in hindsight, now that time has passed, do you think that ENS made a mistake by removing Brantly from the team?
At the time, it was a matter of would we rather lose Brantly or would we rather lose a large portion of the dev team in the community? There were several people who reached out to me and said, I can't in good conscience keep working for ENS or working on ENS, or we had integrations who reached out as well. We have a problem with this. We're not comfortable with this, and if Brantly remains in his role, then we won't be working with you. And so, my own personal opinions aside, it was a threat to ENS not to address the matter. In retrospect, I wish I hadn't acted quite so abruptly and that I'd given more time for people to discuss it and to think it over and to for community input and so forth. But I still believe that in the situation we were in, that letting him go was the only choice that I could make.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for explaining. And in relation also to a bit, in relation to Brantly, currently a lot of people feel that in ENS, ever since Brantly left, there is like a little bit of void of leadership and voice to the point that many people think that you are the CEO or the executive director, and they don't know that actually there is a director that is called Corey Whitaker. And why people have that feeling that there is, what do you think? Is Corey still working for the project? Are you?
Absolutely, and Corey didn't come in to be a public figure. He came in to get all the stuff done that was stopping me from doing engineering work and that was either going undone or was impeding the rest of us. And he's doing an outstanding job of that and of being sort of the heart of the organization when it comes to keeping things running and achieving our goals and structuring everything better. So I'm very glad he's on board, but I'm not too surprised that a lot of people don't know a lot about him because he is focused very much on that organizational excellence end of things. I agree we could definitely do better at communicating with the community and at having publicly visible direction. And that is something we're working on evolving and improving as we go forward. And, Corey's job includes hiring for that.
Good. That's fantastic. And actually, Corey is great at interviews. I understand that he's very busy with operations, which is very important. But I've watched a couple of interviews of him, and I was, this guy is very likable and energetic and has a lot of ideas. So, but anyway, if he also hires somebody who can do that for him, S.I.W.E also is doing a great job with the community, but that's more for the people who are already believers for the community. But yes, somebody who talks in general to the exterior world would be also fantastic. And finally, the marketing is also another thing that people are a bit confused. I think the best marketing is engineering. Actually, in marketing, there is a term that is called engineering as marketing, which means that if you constantly deliver new functionality, people just talk about you, because we've seen that all the time. Google and ChatGPT didn't need a single ad for ages. Google didn't put out ads for many, many years. And ChatGPT even less, right? When there is something interesting, people go use, etc. So, of course, the first thing is what you guys are already doing, creating functionality and all that. But people also think there should be a little bit of marketing effort. And there is a confusion there. Who is in charge or will be in charge of marketing, the DAO or ENS Labs?
So I think it's more valuable to market ENS, the platform, than to market either the DAO or ENS Labs. And some, people have noticed we're starting to put out a few Twitter ads and stuff like that. And that's kind of just us dipping our toes into actual active marketing for the first time. We also have a PR agency who has been doing an outstanding job of handling PR and helping us get our name and image out there and responding to things. But it's also still in very early days. I think you will see over time more evidence of that going forward, though.
Great. So moving to a different block is the vision. We are talking about Web3 visions. And so regarding the vision of ENS, at some point, I know that ENS communicated a lot their intention of being like the Web3 naming system, not another Web3 naming system, but the Web3 naming system. Is that super ambition vision still in place, or now we are starting to see so many other naming systems appearing, and it's more, we are going more towards a multi naming system kind of world?
I still think it's achievable and desirable to have a single naming system, or rather a single namespace. Whether that's multiple or one, the important thing is that there's a single namespace they all are part of, just like DNS integrates with ENS. I think there are a lot of other naming systems coming out. Some of them have novel technology and novel ideas, which I hope we can learn from. Others are blatantly cash grabs. Because everyone realizes that, hey, I can just launch this thing and suddenly people buy all of them because just in case. And that itself can also cause problems when it impedes the actual usability. I think at the moment we're in a bit of a golden age of this sort of thing, because you don't really notice the issues with collisions and with multiple naming systems if you're not using them that much to name things. The more these actually get adopted as viable naming systems, the more those cracks become apparent and widen. So I think as time goes on, that will become a more obvious problem. And also as projects like ENS demonstrate their value for real world use cases, new projects that don't have something novel or useful to distinguish themselves with will have more difficulty getting that attention that they get at the moment. So yes, I still think that's achievable, and I think it's desirable that we have a single unified naming system. I can only imagine what the web would be like if we had 5 different DNS routes.
Yes, that would be great for ENS, definitely. And but one thing that many people struggle to see is, for example, other blockchains like Bitcoin, Solana. It's true that they can import DNS domains if they don't want to use ETH, but is it possible to envision a world in which people from other really different cultures and blockchains like Bitcoin will say, yes, I'm gonna embrace ENS?
It's from a technical point of view, it's all quite straightforward. From a culture point of view, it's a bit of a tough sell. Like, yes, Bitcoiners, please get your .eth name, um, and one solution to that is our existing DNS integrations. Another is that we're quite open that we don't want to add lots of TLDs to our route because we know that conflicts with ICANN, with the IETF, with the open web. But if you can acquire a TLD at the next ICANN auction, or you can convince the IETF to add it to the route, if you're .onion, which is already in a standard and reserved for them, then we're very happy to add all of that to ENS. We're just not happy to sort of stomp all over the efforts of the traditional web, willy-nilly, especially in the sure and certain knowledge that sooner or later ICANN is going to auction off some of those names, and there are going to be direct and immediate conflicts between these naming services and ICANN.
Yes, and I think actually the fact of having DNS integration and being working to make it even easier, it's really one of the things that gives ENS domains a big advantage in that regard, in that race towards becoming that kind of the go-to place for domaining in Web3, right? It's like we are already integrated with the legacy system, which is super important. And so in that sense, and what you say is very interesting, if other blockchains could acquire a Web2 TLD, and in that sense, have you ever considered the idea of maybe moving the ENS infrastructure to its own blockchain so that it would be more tempting maybe for other blockchains to use it as they would see it like the naming blockchain, something neutral?
Yeah, I think in the long run, doing that on an L2 could be, like an ENS exclusive L2 could be a viable approach. CCIP read kind of removes the urgency for that by allowing us to delegate parts of the ENS tree to other blockchains and to L2s and so forth. And I think it's important not to jump on the bandwagon too soon, because L2s are still so early. We don't know which approaches are going to succeed long term. And the last thing we want to do is be announcing, we're going to migrate to this new exciting Betamax technology, which we're sure will be, the future. Really dating myself there. But we really don't want to jump in too soon and end up on an obsolete and abandoned technology. And I think it's very important that we get this right.
Yes, no rush there, please. That's really critical. So regarding the vision, another thing is the target demographic for acquiring new users. It's something that it's not easy to sometimes determine. So, for example, some people are mentioning we need to go for the normies. Other people are saying we need to go for the crypto bros, that many of them still don't use an ENS domain. And the other day I was talking to Matt from Unstoppable Domains precisely, and he said something that was interesting, that their target demographic is in between. It's all those people in centralized exchanges that are not super crypto knowledgeable, but are not normies. And it could be a way to rapidly grow and also to introduce many people into a more decentralized way of using crypto. And Matt said that he thinks that crypto bros are already successful, are already making a lot of money. And many times says, yes, of course, their usability would improve if they use an ENS domain, but they tend to be very techy, very tech savvy. So it's not as easy to grow there. Normies also, maybe it's not as easy to grow because well, it's not impossible, but it's a learning curve. So what do you think? Which target demographic do you prefer?
I guess my approach is a little bit different because I want to see every single wallet have creating an account and setting it up with an ENS name as part of the onboarding flow. And by doing that, we get everyone who's joining crypto, regardless of whether they're a crypto bro or a normie or something in between. And that my main focus there means that we benefit from all the marketing and outreach of all these wallets. It just becomes a part of the default assumption that when you sign up for an account, you get an ENS name. That said, we're also spending efforts on onboarding people newer to crypto because I know the onboarding experience for crypto in general can be quite poor. So we do want to build up an experience where, basically this is your onboard to crypto. Here's a choice of wallets. We'll get you going with an ENS name, with a wallet, with a few dollars from a credit card to to an account to get you started, that sort of thing. So that would be more the normies end of things, or people who have interest but haven't done anything non-custodial yet. But I really think the way we get the broadest adoption is to become the de facto option within crypto.
Okay. So now let's move on to the ecosystem block. Regarding the ecosystem that is being built around ENS, what projects built on top of ENS are you excited about right now?
I guess the ones that come to mind at the moment are things like DM3, which is inter-account messaging built directly on top of ENS and using that as a core component. Umbra, which is a privacy solution, has been around a little longer and also uses ENS as a core component of discovery and identity. And of course, I can't omit things like CB.ID, where they're building an entire identity platform based on ENS being your identity. So I think a lot of the most exciting things are looking at ENS not just as a name for an account, but an actual core part of your Web3 identity. And I think that's how I see it too.
Precisely, that was one of the things that I was going to ask you next, is that Web3 messaging, it's a bit mysterious how many, the amount of projects that try to tackle Web3 messaging, and yes, none of them succeeds. It's like Wallet Chat, Nifty Chat, Skiff, DM3, Console DAO, Chainmail, Etherscan DMs.
XMTP, yeah.
Yes. Why no app gets traction? And I can think only of two reasons. You tell me if there are other reasons. Either there is no real demand for messaging on Web3, or there is a big technological hurdle. What do you think?
I think it's more a UX thing than a technological thing. There is a real stickiness issue in that at the moment, if you want to get your messages, you have to remember to go back and check that website or that app or whatnot. Emails appear in your inbox and you have to check your inbox, but it's such a core part of our identities that of course we do. Instant messages just show up on your phone immediately. But Web3 messaging is kind of in the worst of both worlds because it's at the beginning of a network adoption curve. Not many people use it. And at the same time, you have to go out of your way to use it. So, it's in a really difficult position. Things like wallet integration would help a lot. But then you have the spam and scam issue. So then you have a whole new set of hurdles to deal with. So it's a really difficult space to break into, I think.
Yes, I think that the demand definitely is there. So it's definitely either, and the technological side, you can tell me better, and you say that it's more of a UX side. So probably is that because the demand would be massive. If people could really send a message to any other wallet, who owns that domain? I want that domain, and he doesn't have any contact address on his profile, so I send him a message directly to to their ENS or to their wallet address. So the demand would be, and I was thinking if a couple of giants like OpenSea and MetaMask agreed on some protocol, some standard together, just a couple of them, like tomorrow we launch this together. So, and they announced from tomorrow on, you can send a message to any wallet or to any ENS name, and it will pop in your both your MetaMask and your OpenSea or something like that. I think that would get a lot of momentum and traction.
Yep. And then, as I say, though, the problem you have is spam and scams. Suddenly you introduce messaging, and your wallet is just filled with people trying to get you to click here.
Yeah, one thing that I was thinking about that also the other day, and Web3 started as the internet of value, right? And we are very used, even if there are many new use cases that are not about exchanging value, we are very, it's very in our culture to have some kind of financial incentives for organization. In messaging, even in Web2 times, I remember Bill Gates at some point saying that everybody who sent an email should pay a little amount. So maybe that could be the solution for Web3 messaging. It would be very in the Web3 culture, like, okay, I can message that person, but that person has like a $5 price to messaging them. Then if he likes to talk to you, you get your money back. But if you were a spammer, you have lost £5 or $5 or whatever amount that person wants. Maybe Vitalik is gonna put $1 million because he doesn't have time for anybody. But so that would be also another thing that, I don't know, there are many possibilities. So another thing regarding the ecosystem that people love is sign in with Ethereum. And it has captured our imagination in ENS and even beyond in Web3, like a way of getting rid of the control that Google and all these organizations have over our way of logging into apps. But there is something that technically that people don't understand very well, and maybe you can help us, is what's the difference between signing with Ethereum and connecting your wallet? Because recently MetaMask announced that they have now support for signing with Ethereum, and everybody was like, okay, what's the difference? I already could go on Uniswap, connect my wallet, and my ENS name appears in the top right corner with my PFP profile. Thanks to so what's the difference?
So connecting your wallet lets the app know what your address is, and lets you transact with it. But it's trivial to give a fake address to the app, which doesn't matter in client-side settings because all you can do is fool yourself. But it's no security at all for something where there's any sort of server-side storage. You imagine a situation where you have a list of favorites, for instance, stored on the server, so you can access it each time. You connect and you fake somebody else's address, and now you have their list of favorites. And obviously there are much more damaging alternatives to that. So in order to enable use cases like that, you need a way to prove that you are who you say you are, and that involves signing a message. So sign in with Ethereum is that standard that describes the format of the message and how to sign it and how to verify it, to prove that you really are the owner of account XYZ. And so what MetaMask did is, MetaMask supports signing arbitrary messages, has for a long time. That's what sign in with Ethereum uses, but it deliberately uses a standard that's easily understood by a machine, but also still understood by humans. And MetaMask has added support for detecting when it's a sign in with Ethereum message and showing a more friendly, this app is asking you to sign in dialogue, rather than just the raw, please sign a message dialogue.
Okay, that's beautifully explained. And the SI.W.E, the sign-in with Ethereum product standard, is it fully developed, or
Yes.
What's the state?
Yep. So it's a fully developed standard by Spruce with ENS DAO's funding. They've also developed an official OpenID provider so that you can use it with centralized products if you wish, and they host an instance of that so that you can use it without having to deploy your own. They've been working on enhancements, I believe, but the core product is complete and stable.
We are reaching the end, but before I want to go into the hot topic of the moment, it's not completely Web3 related, but it affects Web3. It's artificial intelligence.
Right?
It's like everybody is talking about this. And I know that you've been paying a lot of attention to artificial intelligence. Our minds are quite blown away. Many of us were interested in artificial intelligence, but didn't expect that it was going to happen so quickly. And this changes many things for every economic sector and also for crypto, Web3, blockchain. So yes, tell me your general take.
Sure. I guess, like many people, this felt like it came out of left field. This is, I watched so-called AI for well decades now, and it was almost universally disappointing. It was chatbots that didn't seem to get any more capable over time, and things people called AI that were really just tree search algorithms and things like that to play chess. And then recently, there's just this explosion in complexity resulting from the development of things like transformer models and so forth, which I don't fully understand. But the fact that suddenly it's resulted in this sea change in their ability is fascinating.
Not even the creators fully understand. They always say that.
True, yes. Although I don't even understand how they work at a basic level, which is something I very much mean to remedy. I find it fascinating. And when ChatGPT was released and I started playing with it, and then almost at the same time, Midjourney 4 was released, I just spent the whole week in a daze, basically. Like, this is just outrageous. And as inevitably it does, it becomes kind of normal, but it's still developing so fast, it's ridiculous. I asked ChatGPT when it came out to write like songs and poems. It did a terrible job. And then I did it again with ChatGPT 4, and now it can actually get rhyme and scansion and so on, and make something that's genuinely amusing. And it's astonishing how fast it's developing these techniques and these abilities. I think anyone who claims they know what's going to happen next is probably either lying or deceiving themselves. It's too weird and too new to like make a good prediction about. I guess if I had to say my guess, I don't think it's going to cause a world taking over singularity in the way people claim they think it will. I think it'll be much weirder than that, but I don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah, definitely the future has this habit of surprising us with being much weirder than we could ever imagine.
Yes.
And this could be one. Actually, it's already in the AI sphere, is already happening, because everybody thought that first would be the McDonald's workers, then the white collar workers, and finally the artists, the writers, and it started the other way around.
Yes.
So really, but we can, even if it's impossible to predict, we can speculate a little bit. And one thing would be the effect on Web3 and the use of Web3 and blockchain in society. There is some good sides and some bad sides for blockchain. But one of the things is, in a world in which artificial intelligence, artificial agents allow us to be more powerful than ever, maybe going towards a world in which and here I'm playing devil's advocate, okay? In that world, we cannot afford people be super free, and the freedom that blockchain gives us maybe could be dangerous, in the sense that terrorists and all kind of dangerous organizations are gonna have more power of destruction than ever. So if the censors, the people who want to control our information, our ability to be free, maybe they can say, now that artificial intelligence allows anybody to build a virus in their garage, maybe in 5 years' time, we cannot afford people to have that level of privacy freedom that blockchain helps to extend. Do you feel that there is potential problems for blockchain and for freedom in that regard?
I guess I think that efforts to limit that sort of thing are going to be so far outstripped by the development of these technologies that they're simply not going to be able to take effective hold. Any attempts to restrict or slow it down are likely to be way behind the curve. So as much as people might try, and whether we should want them to succeed or not, I don't know. I don't think they will.
Okay, and one use that many people are mentioning that could be very useful, and this is good for blockchain, is authenticating provenance images.
Mm-hmm.
Are you excited about that use case, for example, to distinguish if a video really was made by you or by a deep faker?
I think that's going to be a continuous arms race. As we develop better techniques for detecting it, people are going to develop better techniques for evading it. And often you can directly feed the algorithm that detects it into the system with the goal inverted and just mutate it until it passes. I think going forward, there's always going to be the possibility that this thing that we think is legit is actually just faked using a more sophisticated iteration that we haven't, seen yet. So I don't think there's ever going to be a absolute surety over that.
And what about using your ENS name to sign something?
I was about to say, yeah, being able to sign things cryptographically with an identity that traces back to you will be, one of the only ways to really demonstrate that conclusively. And I think in the past we've been able to rely on physical presence and faces and voices enough that crypto has been, restricted in some ways to, people find the usability hard, so they don't bother because there are good alternatives. Maybe that's going to be a lot more necessary going forward.
And another thing, Sam Altman, the creator of the company behind ChatGPT, has himself also funded a company called World ID.
Yes.
So,
I not the biggest fan of WorldCoin myself. I think there's a few problems with it. I don't think fundamentally it relies on trusted hardware because you can't scan someone's irises and hash them and send them without, if you had open source hardware there, you could just invent new irises and invent new people. So fundamentally, it can't be open source. It can't be an open standard. It can't be like generally usable. You have to rely on this one company to build and distribute the hardware, and I think it's a major problem. I think it falls a little bit for the idea that if you can just tie everything to unique people, then everything's solved. But in practice, you could go out with one of these orbs on the street and offer people $20 to scan their irises and collect as many identities as you wanted. It ups the cost a bit, but then, that's what Elon Musk is saying, that like you can stop Sybils by charging $7.99 a month for Twitter Blue, and so it's, just solving uniqueness isn't enough. You need reputation. You need some way to know that somebody is not just who they say they are, but that that's somebody you should listen to.
yes, it's not an easy problem to solve. Okay, well, Nick, I see that we have arrived at the end of our interview, and I know you are a very busy man, so I don't want to keep you longer. So if there's something else you'd like to say?
I guess it seems like an auspicious occasion that we're recording this on the day that we put forward the Namewrapper to the vote. And presumably by the time that this comes out, it'll be deployed. So, I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, we are all looking forward to that. And thank you very much for making that possible. We are very excited. So just let me say again that we are very thankful to have you here. Thank you for answering all the questions. We've gotten to know you better and the ENS project better. So it's been very interesting. And thank you very much for coming on the show.
It was my pleasure.
Take care, man.
Thank you.
Ciao.